Hi everyone, and welcome to Get Started with Reusing Every1 Learning Materials Part 3. My name is Beck Pitt from the Open University, and I'm here to walk us through this presentation together. So this is the third in a series of 5 videos which will help support your use of Every1 Learning Materials. So please do take a look at our first 2 videos. Part 1 covers why and how Every1 Learning Materials can be reused and localized, gives you some ideas and examples of reuse to get you started, and reasons why an open license is beneficial and how this can help your work. So please do check out the video on the QR code shown here on the slide. We also have part 2, again available on the QR code here, and this video covers an in-depth overview of different open licenses, what you need to do to attribute an openly licensed resource, and good practices for attribution. And we'll revisit a couple of these in a moment as well as a bit of a refresher. But what we're going to cover today is what you need to consider if you want to adapt an Every1 learning material for your context, and how to attribute your adaptation of an Every1 learning material. So let's take a look at Every1 learning materials and the license that everything from the Every1 project is licensed under, and that is the CC BY Share Alike 4.0 license. You can see here the attribution statement from Why Digitalize Energy. So what does CC BY Share Alike mean? Well, it has 2 elements to it. The first one, which is in all 6 of the Creative Commons licenses, and we'll see those in a moment, is the BY element, which is the requirement to attribute the resource. And we saw an example of an attribution statement a moment ago, and we'll see some more in a moment as well. The second element is the share alike element. And this basically means that if you make changes to the resource, you create something new from it, then you need to share that new creation back on the same license as the original. And you can see here that we have 6 Creative Commons licenses in total. You may remember these from earlier presentations. And of course, you also have the public domain mark and the CC0 tool, but these are our 6 Creative Commons licenses. And you can see here on the left-hand side, we have our CC BY Share Alike license there. If you want a refresher and a reminder of what the other Creative Commons licenses are, then you can find that available on the QR code here on the right-hand side. So please do check that out. It'll take you over to the Creative Commons website and you can find out more. And of course, you can also look back at the earlier videos in this series as well, which will walk you through the different license types. So let's take a quick recap on attribution and good practice for attribution. And as you may remember from the earlier videos, we have our acronym TASL, which helps us remember to include the title, the author, the source, and the license of any Creative Commons licensed asset that we're intending to use. For example, images in the presentation like this. As you can see here on the right hand side, we have an example of these CC badges, and you can see we've got it's quite small, but on the right hand side you can see that we've got the title, author, source, and license included in that attribution statement next to the image there. So there's an example there. We're going to look at some more in a minute, but also sometimes you'll see, and we'll see later on in this presentation, that sometimes the creator of a resource also has requested statements and information that they would like you to include as well. So you do occasionally see that, and we do have an example of that coming up as well. So here's our statement about Why Digitalize Energy. And you can see here clearly you have the title, it's hyperlinked, so the source is included there. The author or the creator is the Every1 project. And then CC BY Share Alike license is clearly stated there. And if you click on the hyperlink, it takes you to the Creative Commons website and you can find out more. Let's take a look now at attributing OER created by others. So how do we incorporate other open educational resources into our materials? How do we give credit is the question here. So of course, what we can do is tweak the license notice, in this case CC BY, to read that there are exceptions and attribute the authors of any openly licensed resources you're including using CC best practices. So let's take a couple of a look at some examples of this here. Here's our statement. It's why digitalize energy. But this time, draw your attention here to the end of the sentence where it says, unless otherwise stated. So this covers us for the inclusion. In this example, it's a short course, and we've included a number of openly licensed images as part of that course. We didn't create those images. Other people have generously shared them on, for example, Flickr, and then we're using them in our course. So they're kind of discrete assets within the course, and so we've listed them in our acknowledgement section. So the unless otherwise stated makes it clear to anyone who sees the attribution statement for the course that we are including other assets in there and that they are not necessarily on the CC BY Share Alike 4.0 license. You can see another example here. This is the National Aviation Consortium, and they've used the caveat unless otherwise noted at the start of their overall attribution statement for this material. Then, of course, we need to make sure that we note those materials that are governed by the different terms. So you can do this in two ways, really. One is to have a separate credits page, an acknowledgements page at the end of a resource. So as I mentioned, we do this with the Every1, quite often with the Every1 materials in the courses, the Digital Energy Essentials courses, for example. There's a list of the image and asset credits there. Here's an example here for a course called Open Research. And you can see here that the overall course was licensed CC BY Share Alike 4.0, but just like this presentation, just like Every1 resources, we have a list of image and asset credits included, which give credit basically to everything else that's been incorporated into the course, all the pictures and things that we added, all the videos, there they are listed nicely at the end. And this is a statement from the course introduction, which clearly shows the overall licensing of the course, but of course that audio, video and images are governed by different licenses and third parties according to the image and asset credits page. So you might want to present your reuse of OER in this way. Or alternatively, you can note the attribution right next to the material. So for example, here we have a course called Becoming an Open Educator, and you can see here indicated by the arrow in red that underneath this image of the 5 R's, we have a statement, an attribution statement there. So just an alternative way of presenting that information. Great, so let's take a closer look at adaptation. So what do we mean by adaptation? We can change some Creative Commons license materials, but not all of them. So we'll take a look at the 6 different licenses again in a moment. But when we talk about adapting OER, we're talking about changing or modifying it to suit new conditions or needs. So for example, you might have a really great chapter of a CC BY open textbook, but maybe some of the examples are not so relevant for the context that you're working in. So you would quite like to switch them out, or perhaps extend the book chapter to include more examples, or add certain kind of concepts in, or basically revise it so it works better for the students that you're working with, or your service users or clients. So let's take a closer look at change and modification and the different forms it can take. But first of all, let's take a quick look back at the 5 R's. So the 5 rights, when we're thinking about what makes something open, when we think about open educational resources. And here you can see it's the right to retain, to keep a copy, to reuse a material, to redistribute it, to share it, but also critically to revise and remix. So this open element, this revision and this remixing is really, really key to what makes an educational resource open. So in the case of our Creative Commons licensed materials, we have the 6 licenses again here, but which licenses enable adaptation? So we've got our 6 licenses here, and as you can see now, I've crossed out the 2 licenses that contain the non-derivatives or ND element, which means the inclusion of these means basically you can share the materials, but you can't make any, and you can retain them, but you can't make any changes to them and share them publicly. So When we're thinking about adaptation, we're really talking about for looking for materials that are in the public domain, for example, or that have the 4 Creative Commons licenses shown here applied to them. So thinking about the 5 R's, there's 2 different references to adaptation here, revision and remixing. So let's look at each of these in turn. First of all, what do we mean when we talk about revising resources? So as you can see here, the emphasis is really on the content itself. It's about adapting, adjusting, modifying, altering the content itself. So doing something like translating the content into another language would count as a revision to the resource. Whereas with remix, what we're referring to is combining original revised content with other material to create something new. So sometimes this is called a mashup, and really it's about seamless blending of different openly licensed resources plus original content into one resource. So you can see here in the picture we have a smoothie. It's a bit small on this picture here, but basically we have these different fruits. We have our banana, strawberry, pineapple, and orange, and they've been combined. They all have different kind of licenses applied to them. Those licenses are compatible and they've been blended together to create the smoothie that you see here, which has its own license applied to it. A remix is this combination which really is such that it appears seamlessly blended together. So it doesn't have these discrete entities or assets that are identifiable within it anymore. So just as a quick reminder, before we move on, these are the 4 license types. These are the kinds of resources that we're particularly interested in when we're talking about revision and remixing, because these are the 4 Creative Commons license types that allow us to do the revision and the remixing that we just mentioned a moment ago. So how do we attribute open educational resources that we've modified? So I'm going to walk through a couple of examples here. Some of them, if you're familiar with part 2, will be of this video series you would have seen before, but hopefully there'll be a nice refresher as well. So we start out with this example here, which is of some Creative Commons licensed cupcakes. It's an image of these. And as you can see here, this slide is primarily about attributing. So thinking of our TASL acronym earlier, title, author, source, and license. And this image is available on a CC BY license. So we can make changes to it and we can modify it. So you can see here that this image has been desaturated. So it's in grayscale. And so it's different than the original image. So we need to recognize that and attribute it accordingly. So it's quite a minor change here, but we need to make sure that we acknowledge that we've made that change to the resource. So as you can see here, it's got the same attribution statement as we saw on the previous slide, but it also has a note and it says desaturated from original because, of course, the original picture was in color. Here's another example of a photo which I took of the Royal Library of Belgium. And as you can see, it says adapted from, and the adaptation to the picture is that it's been cropped, and it also has this red caption here that says National Library of Belgium that's been added. So again, we are acknowledging through adding that phrasing adapted from that we've made changes to this image. We also have cases as we where we might create a derivative where that cupcake image has been modified substantially and we've created something new from this work. So you can see here a different attribution statement. This work is now called 90fied, and you can see the original, the statement of the original resource, the attribution statement here as well. And then also that 90fied is also licensed as a CC BY resource. So this statement here is, it's a new creation, it has a new title, but we also want to make sure that we are referencing the original work and also licensing it in the same spirit as well. So the original resource is a CC BY, and this derived image is also licensed CC BY. And we'll come on and talk a little bit about this in a moment. So just to say here that in terms of derivatives, such as the image that we just saw a moment ago, you need to make sure that you let potential users know that your new work is a derivative. You need to include the attribution for the original work, and then also be clear about any other rights that, for example, it says here, third-party content use, fair use, etc., that people should be aware of. And you can see here, there's a very handy adapters license chart here, which indicates the kind of licensing we can consider applying to revised images, such as the one that we saw a moment ago. And you can see here that if we think about the cupcake image, it was a CC BY licensed image. If you look on the left hand here, it's about the status of the original work. And you can see that pretty much we've got quite a lot of flexibility. We can see the green here, so it's possible, got the green lit with thumbs up to license them under a number of those. In fact, all of those, all of the 6 Creative Commons licenses, but need to take care, for example, if we thought about maybe releasing that into the public domain, for example, by using the CC0 tool to mark that new creation. And the reason of that is you need to kind of maybe think a bit about the spirit of the original license, and the fact also that because there's no requirement to attribute with public domain CC0 resources, that the information about the original resource would likely get lost downstream as well, because you don't have this requirement to attribute in the same way. You can see here the CC BY non-commercial status of original work raises a number of kind of yellow, or kind of, I put here, take care options, where if you're thinking about that non-commercial element that's within the original, really you want to retain that, because the original creator specified that they didn't want it to be used in a not in commercial contexts. And therefore, if you license on something like a license like CC BY, or CC BY no derivatives, or CC BY share alike, or even into the public domain, then you are then there's the potential that it could be used within commercial contexts. Okay, so moving on, let's think about attribution and licensing an OER that you've remixed. So as we saw earlier, when we think about remix, we're talking about combining original or revised content with other material to create something new. So in the instances of Every1 materials, this could be that you want to, for example, make use of one of our Digital Energy Essentials courses, and you've also found another great OER somewhere that's on a different license, and you want to kind of combine them together to create something new, and you're going to add your own content and some images from various places, etc., etc. You're going to create something really fabulous, new resource. So what do you need to think about when you're thinking about remix? Well, the first thing that you need to do, and this is really, really key when we think about using different types of open educational resource together, is whether they're compatible and whether they work together well. And there's considerations around whether things, as you saw a moment ago, whether things can be used commercially, that we need to consider when we're combining resources together, but also other considerations, and we'll talk about those in a moment. So just some kind of, I guess, headline kind of don't forget or advice here on this slide. The first is that, as we saw earlier, always you need to attribute what resources you're using. And for something like a remix, you'll need to attribute these in an acknowledgement sources list and statement or similar. The license that you can apply to the remix depends on the licenses of the remix resources that you've combined. So quite often it can be easier to look for resources that are on CC BY share alike licenses. It just makes it easier to kind of combine things together, as we'll see in a moment. As we saw, you can't use no derivative licensed materials in a remix that you want to publicly share. So if you're thinking there's a really great textbook that's on a no derivatives license and you want to reuse a chapter of it and add bits in and rewrite bits here, unfortunately, that's not allowed. You might be able to reach out to the original creator and ask them if they'd be happy for you to do that. But according to the license that's already been applied, you can't do that. So you won't be able to publicly share that. You will need to acknowledge any non-commercial license requirements in your licensing of the adaptation remix. And then if someone's requested that you share any adaptations on the same license as the original, you will need to abide by this requirement. So in the instance of Every1 learning materials, these are on a CC BY share alike license. So we therefore are asking you to share any remixes of Every1 learning materials on a CC BY share alike license. And that is a requirement of the reuse of our learning materials. So for maximum flexibility, as I mentioned a moment ago, for your remix or adaptation, you really want to be looking to combine resources that are on more liberal and open licenses, such as CC BY. And I mentioned this a moment ago, and we'll see why in a moment. So let's take a look at an example of an Every1 resource, which is an adaptation. So this is our What is the Digital Energy Transition course. And as you can see here, this course uses, and this is the attribution statement, this course uses material created by the International Energy Association, a report from 2017 called Digitalization and Energy. And this is licensed CC BY 4.0. You can see here, it makes it clear that the adaptation is published by Every1 and it's licensed CC BY Share Alike 4.0 unless otherwise stated. As we mentioned a moment ago, that is because our courses contain images, openly licensed images that were created by other people. So we have to attribute them properly, and we have a list in the acknowledgement statement of those image credits. You can also see here that we have two sentences which talk about liability and endorsement. And these are requirements from the IEA for instances where people remix their materials. As I mentioned earlier, in addition to TASL, the title, author, source, license kind of good practice around attribution. Sometimes you see requirements from people, such as in this instance, where people want you to include statements about endorsement and so on. So we've included those, obviously, within our attribution statement. Finally, you can see here also that we've also indicated how we've modified the original work, so how we've made changes to the digitalization and energy report. And so obviously there's new content in there. And we've also reworked some excerpts from the report, reordered and reworked them, and added some new material, for example, on the European Green Deal. So this is the attribution statement from that course. So that hopefully that gives you an idea of how to present examples of remix. And here's one within the Every1 context. You can also see on here that we incorporated a CC BY licensed resource, but the overall adaptation is licensed CC BY Share Alike. I'm just going to move on and show you why that is possible. There is a very handy resource here from Creative Commons, which basically gives you the remix compatibility of different licenses here. So what can I remix? How do I know the different types of openly licensed content work well together? This handy table from Creative Commons sets out really clearly what different types of open license are compatible with each other. And you can see here along the horizontal and vertical, we've got our 6 Creative Commons licenses and our public domain and CC0 resources as well. So let's take a closer look at the table. You can see we've got a couple of lines of crosses going both along the showing on this table, and these apply to the 2 licenses that have no derivatives elements in them. So you can see here that the CC BY no derivatives and CC BY non-commercial no derivatives license types are basically, it's not possible to include them in a remix. And of course, that's because, as we saw earlier, that there is this no derivatives element. You can't make changes to it and publicly share these resources. Therefore, you can't include them in a remix. We have our CC BY share alike license here on the left-hand side. And you can see along here what types of resource, what types of licenses rather, this type of resource is compatible with. And of course, this is the license type that's been applied to Every1 learning materials. And these types of resource can be remixed with CC BY, share alike, of course, CC BY licensed materials plus public domain and CC0 materials too. And of course, we have that requirement to license the remix on a CC BY share alike license. So thinking back to those two conditions, it's about attribution, and then also by share alike license material, there's that requirement to share your new creation on the same license type. Therefore, of course, they're not compatible, or this license type isn't compatible with any of the other license types shown. So you can see crosses there against our CC BY non-commercial and our CC BY non-commercial share alike license types, as well, of course, our no derivative license types as well. It is, of course, compatible with CC BY because that requirement to attribute is, of course, included in all of the 6 Creative Commons license types. So this hopefully gives you a little bit of an idea of compatibility and what kind of license types to look for when you're thinking about remixing and putting content together to create something new. And then finally, of course, we have our little adapters license chart here as well to take us through the status of original work, and then also think about the different licenses that we might be able to apply to our new creations. And as you can see here for the CC BY share alike license, that original Every1, the license that applies to Every1 resources, of course, our adaptation would need to have the CC BY share alike license applied there. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a run through of the options open to you, or some of the kind of requirements and thinking that you'll need to do if you're interested in making changes to Every1 resources, and how to kind of acknowledge that properly in your own new creations. So finally, before we close, it's worth remarking on what can I remix. And if you wish to use a resource in a manner that's not permitted by the license, you might want to reach out to the rights holder or the creator to get permission or look at an alternative work. So it might be that if you reach out to the creator of a resource, they might give you permission to use it differently, or alternatively, you might want to look for more for other resources out there. And of course, there's a huge number of Creative Commons license resources out there. So there is likely to be an alternative that might be on a more permissive license and enable you to therefore do and make the changes that you like and use it in the way that works best for you. So there are kind of different ways and approaches to that if at first the resource that you find doesn't quite work for your purposes. So thanks so much for listening. I know it's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour through adaptation and remix and reuse of open educational resources and Creative Commons licensed resources. I hope that's given you a flavour of some of the considerations and things that you need to take into account. And I look forward to seeing you for the next video, where we'll be doing some walkthroughs of adaptations of Every1 learning materials, so you can get a sense of how you could perhaps adapt these, and we'll give you some suggestions and do some of that in real time. All right, thanks so much for your attention, and you can find out more about Every1 on this QR code in the website. Thanks so much for watching.